right, Dan Pizzuta is here, NFL writer. He's joined us in the past. I think he's one of the smartest guys in the content game. What's going on, Bubba?
He's just chilling in a hotel room in Indianapolis and getting to, the fun things of the Combine. Mike McDaniel this morning said that someone asked him about the schedule of the Combine. Yeah. It was just like every day is the same day at the Combine, which I think is going to be the truest thing that has been spoken by a coach this week.
My line. I don't know if somebody said this to me or not. It might be one of those deals where I stole it and I don't remember it because I've been saying it for years. But I definitely use it every year. The Combine is like Vegas, where you don't really need to do it for more than 36 hours. And if you're there for like 3 days, Lord have mercy. Like you don't need to be doing that unless it was funny because a couple years ago, I was meeting with someone. And this is when I probably drank a little bit more than at the Combine than I do now. And again, I say this every podcast. My advice to young journalists is not to drink a lot at the Combine. Just nurse an Amstel Light. Just nurse a light beer. You're good. But I remember someone saying this to me, like, you can tell who's good at the Combine because there's teams, it's like 10 p.m., they're having 11 agent meetings. They're like having 17 analytics guys in for interviews, blah, blah, blah. And then there's the guys where the entire staff is just boozing at 3 p.m. And it's like you can get a pretty good handle at the Combine on who's going 8-7 this year, 8-9 this year by just checking the bars, checking the JW Marriott and seeing if there's full staffs in there.
It was I just got in last night, so haven't fully checked out the bar, though. Landing from in Indianapolis to High Velocity, I think was about 40 minutes total for me. So yeah, it's just one of those nights that it doesn't stop.
It does not stop. That's a great tagline for the Combine. It does not stop, and it probably should. All right, we're going to do your impact free agents, guys who can change the fortunes of teams this year. I'm intrigued because Mina and I did a thing 10 days ago about the free agency preview and all this stuff. And then the cap goes up about $10 million more than expected. So about $20 million total. All of a sudden, John Harbaugh is saying, oh, we can keep Ronnie Stanley. Why not? Why can't we keep Ronnie Stanley? All of a sudden, Brett Veach is saying that Trey Smith is in play to stay in Kansas City, which I wrote off. I just said he's going to get too expensive. There's going to be too many 20 plus $20 million deals, highest paid guard in the league. The Bears are going to be waiting for him, all that stuff. All of a sudden, they've got an extra $10 million to play with. This is a godsend. It's a godsend to everybody but the Bengals, who will somehow inexplicably not be able to use that $10 million at all. Hands are tied. But it's changed everything. But there's still a good crop of free agents. There's still guys who, it's funny, everybody, I've heard people say this, it's a boring class of free agents. I guess if you don't know what you're looking for, do you know what I'm saying? Like there's still offensive linemen, there's still guys, there's wide receivers 2, wide receiver 3. I'm sorry that Jamar Chase isn't available. Like that sucks. This isn't Madden. Like this is a free agency where you can sign 1 or 2 guys to improve your fortunes. The team I look at last year is the Washington Commanders, who went out and got a bunch of guys that it was not like, oh my God, how we let the Commanders have Frankie Luva? No, nobody was talking about this. They just went out and signed a bunch of B-plus free agents. They got credibility in the offensive line. They signed a bunch of guys that kind of second wave free agents, and then all of a sudden they're playing in the NFC title game. That's how you use free agency in the modern game to me.
Yeah, and I think the way free agency has been kind of happening, even over the past couple of years, and I do think last year's class was still a little more top heavy than we get to this year, even though there are going to be useful players, like you said, in this year's class. Like when I was putting together the top 100 free agent posts that I've done for the past 2 years, up at the top, you can kind of, it's kind of like everyone says the draft every year, where every draft analyst is like, there's 3 star players and there's not a lot of difference between 15 and 65 if you're picking it. And I think that's kind of similar to what free agency has kind of turned into. And I think a lot of these players are probably going to how impactful they are is probably going to matter where they go and exactly what role they're being asked to play. But like you said, there are going to be a lot of free agents who are going to be useful. And the way we've seen the game kind of change, even over the past like couple years, where bringing back the spine, especially of the defense, and that's where this free agent class is going to
Yeah.
be real good. Deep at interior defensive line, where you can get some
Yep.
guys, linebacker, safety. You have those positions. If you can kind of bring in and steady those, you're probably putting yourself on the right track.
I'll do one better. It's also like the draft, in as much that everybody always says next year's class is going to be so much better. You just wait. You just waiting for everybody's saving their bullets for next year, and then just the same. We just have the same conversation next year. It's just like, oh, okay, bunch of extensions. Like, who's the best player? Is Ndamukong Suh the best player to ever reach free agency? True free agency.
Maybe. I mean,
Reggie White, but that was a different.
Sure. I mean, probably. Have to, off the top of my head, probably Drew Brees. Still wasn't quite Drew Brees.
But that wasn't at that time. If he was, 5 years later.
He had the one year where he ended up good, and then became Drew Brees in New Orleans. But there's never a huge star that way, and I think it's going to be interesting because there are some trade candidates this year who are kind of might be at that level, which I think could impact how aggressive some teams are in free agency early, if they're kind of waiting to see how those dominoes fall. But this is the place where you kind of fill out your roster and get some good guys who are going to be kind of a core of a team, not necessarily what's going to, lift your team and be the top thing.
Completely agree. All right. Your number one ceiling changing free agent.
So this is kind of going to kind of a weird way of how we're talking about this, but I have Ernest Jones.
Please, let's get as weird as possible. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Ernest Jones.
Oh, okay. Okay, sure.
He's one of my favorite defensive players, one of my favorite linebackers, and I think we kind of saw how he impacted 3 different teams last year. Before the season, I kind of looked into the most underrated players in the league. And I did an article about that. And I had him second because he was just a guy who was part of the F them picks Rams, where he was able to come in and just because of everything else around him was just kind of able to play a very specific role and was very good against the run, good in coverage. And he was just kind of like the glue that held a lot of things together. The Bobby Wagner year in Los Angeles, or Ernest Jones was doing a lot of work that allowed Bobby Wagner to do kind of the same similar thing to Frankie Luvu this year, doing a lot of the work that allows Bobby Wagner to kind of do more of what he's good at instead of playing, the prime Bobby Wagner, what he was doing with the Seahawks. But if you look at what he did in Seattle was 17th in EPA per play against the run before they traded for Ernest Jones. They were 5th afterward. And it was a similar jump in success rate. So he was this piece in the middle of the field that was just kind of able to really allow Seattle to do what they wanted to do on defense. I think we kind of saw his loss in Los Angeles this year, where they kind of struggled in the middle of the field, really hoping Omar Speights could be that type of guy, but it didn't totally get that in the first year as a starter. So if we're looking at how the middle of the field is so important for defenses and offenses to target, I think having a guy like Ernest Jones in the middle of the field is really going to be an impactful thing for potentially a few teams.
I love this. So I'm going to start here. I thought a lot of smart people were surprised that the Rams basically gave Ernest Jones permission to leave. I thought that was surprising, and there was some head scratching around the league when that happened. He's the type of guy you lose, and then you spend the next 3 years, 4 years looking for an Ernest Jones type, and you go, oh, maybe we should just sign this guy to a reasonable extension. Fine. Like, I totally agree with you. The other thing is linebackers, just the way the sport is going with the Shanahan-McVay tree, like, I'm a linebacker guy now. I was not a linebacker guy for a long time. I love linebackers. Like, they are, I think that there was a thought there like 5 years ago that at some point linebackers were going to become like the every down linebacker just wasn't going to exist. There's going to be 4 pass rushers and 7 defensive backs. There's always going to be. And then we found out, guess what? It's very valuable. Ernest Jones is that type of guy. I completely agree with you. Give me the fits.
So I like him as a potential running mate with Frankie Louvu in
Oh,
Washington. Um, as a team that's going to play like a lot of nickel, is going to have two
yeah.
linebackers on the field. I think having those two in the middle of the field together could be really fun. And Washington has so much cap space where they could be working for someone like that. And then basically anyone in the NFC West, I think, except for San Francisco. I think
Yeah, San
yeah, he
Francisco's
could fit
spoken
there.
for.
Yeah, obviously, we're coming back to Seattle. I
Yeah,
think would
yeah,
still be
that
a
would be
very
great.
good thing.
Or the
Arizona,
Rams could just be like, we're sorry.
the
We're
Rams could
sorry.
really Rams could have used an Ernest Jones like
Yes.
linebacker last year. It came up a couple of times, and then in Arizona too. I think that
Mm.
could be a fit where that I think that defense could just kind of use any high end talent they could get.
Yeah, I don't know what the hell's going on in Arizona. I just don't know. I don't know if they're going to splurge this year. I don't know what they're trying to do. Buda Baker. If you want to do something really fun, I'm about to say the dorkiest thing in the world. So you have what's it called? NFL Pro. Do you know what I'm talking about? Like
Yeah.
the tape thing. Look at Buda Baker's run stops because you can do it. You can filter by anything.
Yes.
It is the most like vaguely pornographic football thing you're going to see in your entire life. It's just this he's just destroying guys. He just stops guys in their tracks like over and over again. He's like the defensive back with him, or whatever you want to call him, who gets the most run stops. He just destroys guys. He stops them. He's a wall. It's awesome.
Yeah, and the way they kind of, because they don't have a lot of talent on that defense,
Yeah,
especially
they
in
just
the
let him do whatever.
secondary, the way they're moving him around and he's either in some of their three safety looks and just
Yeah.
like coming from depth, the way he charges. Yeah, he was covering a lot for that defense. So yeah, using any type of linebacker or even a corner to get some help for that Arizona team would definitely be useful.
By the way, it's really bad when a guy that far back in the defense leads your run defense. I just want to announce that. It's cool that he can do it. It's actually a bad thing. Just so
Yes.
everybody knows. If he's your run stuffer, we got some problems here. All right, who's your number 2?
All right, you talked about him a little bit, but it's Ronnie Stanley because there's not a lot of high caliber left tackles who are going to be available, and we know how valuable a left tackle can be. I think just coming back out of the Super Bowl with Kansas City, and I would say that could potentially be a fit if that is something the Chiefs want to look at. Where I think if depending on if you are able to keep Trey Smith, you move Tooney back to guard. You have a veteran left tackle, and Stanley was interesting because through the ESPN pass block win rate, he was 12th among tackles, but Sports Info Solutions had him with a huge amount of blown blocks. But I think that was a lot of the disconnect there was how often he was asked to block longer because of Lamar Jackson. So I think if you get him in kind of a more quicker offense, like either a Kansas City who did really well kind of with some of the quick game that they were doing, Miami could be interesting too. Now, with Mike McDaniels came out today and said they're going to act as if Teron Armstead isn't going to be on the roster. And then I think it was just announced that he's going to lower his salary to the minimum so Miami can move around as if he's not going to, and his cap hit isn't going to be.
I didn't see that.
I think it just happened like 5 minutes before we started recording. So I think that in that type of offense where, you're not going to be blocking for a long time, and Stanley's a little older, long injury history, which is why, he hasn't been as reliable and why the market might not be as big for what he, his peak. But if you put him in an offense like that, where he only has to, be blocking a little bit for that quick passing game in Miami, and then have, that physical presence on the outside for the run game, which was non-existent last year. I think those are two fun fits for him too.
It's interesting. Mina and I did a little bit of Ronnie Stanley destination shopping, and I thought, well, everybody's going to want a left tackle. And then you go through it, and there's actually not that many teams.
Right.
And I almost wonder if it almost became a little bit like the quarterback position has in the last few years, where people have said to me the reason that quarterback seems so settled franchise to franchise typically is that every owner walks in and goes, what's our plan at quarterback? And then the GM goes, I don't know. Could we sign Kirk Cousins? I don't know. Like what the we gave Daniel Jones $40 million. What do you want from us? And like left tackle is like the second thing you ask about, right? Like that's
Right.
what's a quarterback, what's a left tackle, and I wonder if teams just settle that position for the sake of settling it, and then the market for Ronnie Stanley is actually not as robust as you would think.
Yeah, I think it is too, especially when, you look at what he is right now at 31 years old and, playing his first full season really
God,
since
he seems young. He seems young to me. He seems like 26 to me still, even though he signed that contract during COVID and got hurt, all that stuff. He was the selection before Laremy Tunsil when Tunsil was crashing down the boards, if we remember.
Yeah, it's wild how some of these things just kind of blend together. And I was just at a press conference for the Jaguars GM who's 34, and so age doesn't mean anything. It all just kind of blends together right now.
Everybody thought I looked like the Jaguars GM. I don't. It's just the hair and the method of dressing, which I don't even dress like that anymore. I don't even have my hair like that anymore. I got full. If you're watching on YouTube, I don't have the undercut thing here. And now Lindsey Jones just texted me. Now they've seen him in person. People think he looks more like, or gives the vibe more like Solak. So I'm good. Deal me out. I'm good. Solak, you get compared to the Jaguars GM. I'm all set. I never have to hear about it again. So I'm good. That might be the biggest win for me today.
Yeah, it might be. As someone who was standing like right next to him during his the press availability, I don't see either one of you or Solak. So I'll take both of you off the hook. I think Solak is more, for the age and not even stature, because I think he's the bigger, slightly taller guy. So
how tall is James Gladstone? 5'10"?
Yeah, I mean he looked like he probably could have been on this podcast.
Okay.
So it's kind of one of those things where he's not looking like one of those, jacked football guys. But yeah, I wouldn't say he's, small at any point too.
All right. Are you saying maybe Ben Solak is small?
As someone who is about Ben Solak's size, I cannot say that it would be calling the kettle black. Yeah.
Okay. We'll leave it at that. Next topic. All right. Who's number 3?
All right. So going from talking about small guys to some very big guys, and I think I'm going to double up here because Osa Odighizua and Milton Williams are two guys who I think, with what we've seen, how important getting penetration from the interior defensive line is going to be. I think these are two guys who are going to be very interesting to watch what their markets are. I think I'm on an island of liking Odighizua a little more than Milton Williams. I think a lot of people got real excited about what Milton Williams did over the past year with the Eagles. But I think if you look at some of their pass rush metrics, they're about the same. Like, there is no way where one of them is much better than the other one. And Odighizua is played more snaps. I think he's a little better of a run defender. He's a year older, but I don't think you're missing too much if you are going for Osa over some of the quickness of Milton Williams. They were both, in the top 12 of pass rush win rate this year. Odighizua was 4th in 2023. So it's not like this is just coming on for him. So he has a couple of years where he's been able to be quick in the interior and be able to kind of move in. He played more snaps. He had more hits. So I think it is something where if you are looking for that interior defensive line pressure, I don't think you can go wrong with either one of them.
Is there going to be a big price difference?
I'm not sure. So I was actually just looking at Jason Fitzgerald at Over the Cap. They do some of the projections for premium subscribers, which I think people should be, because Over the Cap is a very good site. Well, they have Osa going for 488 and Milton Williams going for 357. So it is interesting that I think they were with me a little bit, that Osa is going to get a little more. But with Milton Williams being a year younger, having that Eagles Super Bowl run just on his resume as the last thing NFL evaluators saw. I wouldn't be surprised if it is a little closer. And I think if you're looking at the general NFL media, I think a lot of people would have expected Milton Williams to be getting more, but I don't think there's that big of a difference between.
Only because of the playoff run. Only because he became so much more famous during the playoff run. To me, Milton Williams is the type of guy who never reaches free agency because Howie Roseman, with those guys, signs him to 4-year, $25 million extensions the moment they show any promise in practice. They'll like stop practice when they're extension eligible and be like, please sign this. And the guy takes it. And then the league is like, how is this guy only making $4 million, well, $8 million, whatever it is. Like the fact that he's reaching free agency is a bit of a, I wouldn't say mistake by the Eagles because they played everything else right. They're fine, but their MO is to sign these guys up for long deals as soon as they're eligible.
Right, and one guy is eventually going to slip through the cracks.
They can't all. You can't all be the you can't keep getting away with this meme for Howie Roseman. Like we're good on this one. Give me some fits for both these guys.
All right, so I like Green Bay and San Francisco for Osa Odighizua because I think those are the two defensive lines that, especially last year, just did not have the juice they were expecting. And there wasn't a lot going on in the middle of those defenses. And if Cincinnati can figure out how to get some room, which they probably aren't, but if they were going to make one big free agent move, I think having some help along that defensive line where you're not going to get the type of edge rusher who can, really help with Trey Hendrickson there, who had like 43% of Cincinnati's pressures last year, which is kind of unsustainable. But if that could fit. And then I also, more for Milton Williams, Arizona, another place, the Jonathan Gannon connection. They were kind of one of those teams last year that tried to just bring in they tried the Washington thing where they just kind of brought in a bunch of competent players, but didn't have quite the same impact because they just didn't fill it out quite as much. So I think having a guy there, they really don't have a lot in that front seven right now that they can really count on. And Houston too. I think Houston placing one of these guys in that defensive interior with the edge rushers they have would be just absolutely insane.
The reason the Arizona thing didn't work is because Dan Quinn's a lot better defensive coach than Jonathan Gannon. That's part of it. And then the other reason is that Jaden Daniels might be a top 3 quarterback in this league. And Kyler Murray's probably not going to get there, unfortunately. But yes, no, Adam Peters, again, I go back to the Monty Osborne thing. We're talking about the Cardinals. I just don't know their plan. I just want to see them, I guess, be buyers, kind of like what we're talking about here. Get these guys and then let's see something here. Like I just don't, they're kind of in football purgatory. They've got a quarterback who they can win with, but it's just kind of bleh right now. I don't know. We'll see. All right. Who's next?
All right, I have Chris Godwin, which is going to be, I think, potentially the one kind of impact receiver who could potentially, make a difference for a team. But we'll see because there was going to be a very big dead money hit if his contract voided. They agreed with the Buccaneers to move that to the day before free agency, which does give them a little more time to work out an extension to eliminate any
couple guys did that this year. Is this new?
Yeah. I've over the past, I think, like a year or so, it has been something where they've moved voids back to work out an extension. And I think they did a similar thing with Mike Evans last year too. But I think, talking, it sounded like today they don't really want to let Chris Godwin go. So I wouldn't. Right. If you have a guy like that, and I think when we look at what the rest of the wide receiver market is, where you're either betting on a rebound from, the Amari Coopers and DeAndre Hopkins of the world, or, you're kind of betting on a breakout from like a Diami Brown or something. That's kind of the free agent wide receiver market we have right now. So especially if T. Higgins is going to get franchised, which it looks like, Chris Godwin is the guy, and he is someone who is so good. Before his injury, he was 7th in yards per route run. It's just can play from the slot, play outside. I think you have like this type of ability where he can completely change on off, especially if you bring him in with like a young quarterback. It's just a guy who can just be that kind of safety net, who can work some of the short. And he was already, I think, 15th in yards after the catch over expected with the half season. That is a full season rank that he was 15th. I think he only played with 7 games. So he
He
is,
had
is someone where if he's healthy, he's going to be he's one of the best receivers in the league.
so NFL Pro had that stat that him and Baker right before the injury had the best quick game connection in the sport, basically.
Yeah.
Like Baker's quick throws to Chris Godwin were incredibly valuable. And one of the stats that was kind of baked in that little nugget they had was that no one took passes in front of what you would call it, in front of the sticks, and made them first downs more often than Chris Godwin did. Like he took 5-yard quick game receptions and then just got the first down more than anybody in the sport. And I think that shows you mentioned inside, outside, deep, short, like you can build your own Chris Godwin offense. And I think that's why you throw money at him. That's also why Tampa Bay wants to keep him.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that was one of the kind of the fun things they did in that Liam Cohen offense that I really liked, how they kind of got Baker into some of that quick game, kind of stopped him from trying to do too much extending plays, which I think is where we've seen Baker Mayfield get himself into trouble in the past. And the way they were able to get Godwin kind of just freely open in space, which is why I think one reunion in Jacksonville, it could be fun.
Oh, yeah.
Liam Cohen said the offense is going to run through Brian Thomas Jr., which I think as you look at the roster right now, it should. But I think adding a Chris Godwin there could be a lot of fun, especially since I don't really think Christian Kirk is going to be on the roster going forward. So you still need someone there, which I think is, having Godwin and Brian Thomas Jr. could be a fun, Godwin Evans. New England, obviously, like they just need someone. And I think that could be something that Drake May can throw to, because Drake May was really good last year. I think he was the second best rookie quarterback last year. Just kind of when you look at his situation, what he had to deal with, just getting any type of receiver help there is going to help. And then also the Chargers, because they also just need some receiver help too. Just give Justin Herbert. Yeah, all of these. There's a lot of teams that could use a receiver, and especially helping some of these younger quarterbacks out who just don't have that go-to guy.
Unplanned excursion on this. So last week I said that I don't think anybody's going to be the next Eagles because nobody's Howie Roseman. But when I look at a team that's like dominant on the lines or getting dominant on the lines, settled quarterback position, good skill guys, I'm thinking Denver's really close because of how good their offensive line is, right? And that they can add. They showed promise in the front seven last year. Obviously, Nick Benito should be, and Patrick Surtain. Like I think they're a draft away, and maybe a couple free agent additions away, or a big trade away from being that level of team. But I also think, looking at these rosters, the Bucs are built to be good for a long time. Like their line is awesome. You can win with Baker. There's proof of concept there. I think that they're always going to be able to generate pressure because of who their coach is and the athletes on their defense. Like Jason Light is building something, and we need to have that conversation more. I think Bucs fans are now trying to get that conversation going, and I agree with them. But like, I think the Bucs and the Broncos are the teams that are most primed to take a real deal leap in the next couple of years, as far as just like, oh my God, they made a Super Bowl, and the general public is surprised by it, but ball knowers are not.
Yeah, I think it's possible, especially, when you look at what Denver did last year, the way they were able to just kind of over the season, kind of figure out what Bo Nix did well. And then they were just like, let's just keep doing that, which is something that I think more offenses than you would imagine do not kind of have that, light bulb go off, be like, this is what a quarterback does well. Let's keep doing it. And the offensive line did play a big part in that, because Nix was, I think, had one of the highest just changes between his production when he wasn't pressured and when he was. But they were so good at allowing him to stay in. It was a similar thing to Baker. I think they kind of treated the quarterbacks the same way, where if we get this guy to be able to stay protected in the quick game, it's going to help him and stop from trying to extend plays, kind of get over his skis a little bit with what they were doing on offense. So when we kind of look at some of the structure on offense, I think those two teams are very similar. I think Denver's a little closer on defense, because I think Tampa Bay, especially with some of their free agents, it needs to bring in a couple more guys on that defense. But Tampa Bay also has, I think, the easier path in the division than than Denver does, which is tough.
No Mahomes, only Derek Carr there for the Bucks. All right, you got a fifth guy?
So those were mostly mine because I brought
you twinned up the inside
to end up. So
defenders. You're just good at your job. So you're just good at your job. So you combine two guys instead of making them two. All right, what were you gonna say? Sorry.
I have two guys that I'm interested in, kind of as like buy low candidates a little bit. Talanoa Hufanga, who I don't expect is going to get a lot in free agency. It might be kind of a 1-year prove it deal just because of the injuries. But if he is a guy that a team is able to bring in for a cheap 1-year deal to see if he has it and he stays healthy, like that shifts what a defense can be on the back end, just the way he can aggressively play anyways. One of those guys who can run downhill. He has the ability to cover deep. So I think he's going to potentially be a fun kind of buy low.
Unimaginable a couple years ago before the injuries that he would be having to go on a 1-year prove it deal, but that's just how injuries work.
If he was healthy, he'd be up there as the top safety in this class. I think even with Javon.
If he was healthy, he wouldn't be a free agent. They would have signed to a real big extension.
That's probably also true. And then to kind of go with the guards, Kevin Zeitler, who has just been really good. He was great in his 1 year with Baltimore. Signed only a 1-year deal with Detroit because he's a little on the older side, but was again really good. Could have been an all-pro at guard. So I think he is going to be another guy that probably is going to get like a 1-year deal at not a lot of money just because he is on the older side. But if you need a guard that's just going to be plug and play, and we've just kind of seen how important that interior offensive line play is, especially now with some of these interior defensive linemen who are able to get some more pressure there. If you just need a guy who's going to be able to plug in a hole immediately, like I'd sign Zeitler to as many 1-year deals until he proves he can't.
All right. What a list. Enjoy Indy, buddy. What's next? What's next on the agenda? You going on some press conferences or what?
I think I'm doing a little bit, going to do a few more shows, bounce around.
Let's go.
It's always just kind of walking around, seeing what happens. So going with the flow.
Let's go. Do every show you can. Thanks, buddy.
All right. I appreciate it.